Come the 1920s, Europe's railways had started committing to steam locomotives with the 462 wheel arrangement, more commonly known as the Pacific wheel arrangement. The only countries to continue building these smaller 460 locomotives were Great Britain, Poland, Romania, and the Netherlands. I've talked about the NS Class 3500. I've talked about the NS 3700. So it would only be the natural course if I was to discuss with you the NS 3900. The 1920s saw the widespread adaptation of steel-bodied carriages. These were more robust than wooden-bodied stock, they were more modern in terms of their upholstery, and most railways did realise the benefits of steel-bodied outweighed the cost saving of wooden stock. The Nederlandse Spoorwegen adopted the practice in 1928, with the first 15 of the so-called oval window carriages. No point for guessing where that nickname comes from. The problem is, they literally outweighed the wooden stock. The venerable NS Express locomotive, their Class 3700, had difficulties getting full-length steel-bodied carriage rakes moving. Luckily, a lot of technological advances and upgrades to the infrastructure allowed NS to design a beefed-up, heavier version of the 3700 to boot. Whereas the 3700 had been built by Bayer Peacock in Manchester, Werkspoor in Amsterdam, at least by the time of the 3700's construction, Henschel in Kassel, Hanemach in Hanover, and Schwarzkopf in Kleinwallstadt, the new locomotive was to be solely built by Henschel. It was not to be a 462 because the NS only had two suitable turntables for a locomotive of that length, located at stations only 13 kilometres apart. And then people moaned about the bully Pacifics on the withered arm. So instead, the new NS Express locomotive, in fact their only new express design, was to be a 460. As far as NS goes, if the 3700 was a giant, the new 3900 was a Goliath. When Henschel delivered the first batch of 22 in 1929, they very much looked like they meant business. And it was exactly that rich business folk which they were intended to carry. It took no time at all before the locomotives were put to work on the international corridor trains, as well on more famous named international services such as the Lorelei and the Rheingold. These services immediately highlighted the most obvious and universal problem with the class: clinging smoke. Small, lipped chimneys have a characteristic where the exhaust clings onto the airflow of the chimney itself rather than the blast being enough to lift the smoke up. And so, the 3900s debuted smoke deflectors, a mostly foreign design aspect for NS locomotives. The handholds at the bottom of the deflectors gained the cute nickname of crescent moons. The second 1930 batch was fitted with deflectors when they arrived, which, when paired with stovepipe chimneys, alleviated the problem of hampered visibility. The 3900s had 4 cylinders, like the 3700s. The outer cylinders were driven by inside Walschaert motion, with the inner set driven by eccentrics. A favourite design feature of mine is the sandboxes. Can you see where they are? They're actually right here, hidden behind the cylinder casing. The filler cap is behind the deflectors. Despite doing exactly what NS expected them to do, the 3900s were not popular. Not with crews nor passengers. Firemen loathed the big engines, their enormous boilers were very, very hungry. The 3900s rode very roughly, which was in stark contrast with the 3700s they replaced, which many crews swore were the smoothest locomotives on NS books. Their brakes were perhaps a little too good. Hitting the brakes too hard would result in water surging forward, with the resulting slosh as the water hit the front of the tank, giving the water enough momentum to push open the filler cap, leaving passengers at the mercy of very localised showers. Comment has been made about how you could judge the fuel range in a 3900 by how many times you can reliably make one come to a halt. To add insult to injury, another unpopular NS locomotive would be introduced in 1930, the 6300, which shared many components with the 3900s, including a very similar boiler. If the 3900 was a Goliath, the 6300 was a Colossus. Yet aside from the heavy coal consumption, the 6300 did not suffer the same shortcomings. But greater embarrassment still awaited the 3900. In 1934, NS commenced operation of their first diesel train set, the DE3. And whilst the press had well and truly waxed lyrical about these new trains, their engines gave out within the year. To temporarily take over the services, steam locomotives had to stand in for the short-distance expresses. hauling pitifully short trains of sometimes as few as 3 carriages. The locomotives designated to hold these so-called steam diesel services were the 2100s, a 440, the 3700s, and the 3900s. Even when hauling trains as short as 3 vehicles, the still brand new 3900s were outpaced by both the 3700 and the 2100, owing to the high resistance on the 3900. So the 3900 were kept well away from light duties, and the class of 32 remained on the heaviest international luxury expresses. But the skies were still not clear. With cracks in the firebox becoming one of the most prominent issues with the class, and the fact that they only achieved their intended 1600 horsepower output when stoked hard on the best quality coal, they drew the ire of the press. The new locomotives were not modern enough, they claimed. Crews never really liked the 3900s either. Even their nickname Big Jumbo was mostly in reference to the 3700. A saving grace for the new express locomotives was that NS was building more and more types of steel-bodied carriages, from new batches of the aforementioned oval window type to the D-stock to the all-steel post carriages. What the 3900 lacked in pace, they made up for in brawn. Their 1.85 metre driving wheels, smaller than those of a 3700, aided in better torque when pulling away with these all-steel trains. And the Germans had been all too keen to take note of that. During the war, 24 examples ventured abroad, 22 of which were repaired and reinstated after the conflict. Owing to NS now being fully dedicated to electrifying their main lines, whatever place they had for the 3900 was a temporary one. The first withdrawal from service, due to being surplus to requirement, happened in 1954, and the next year another 10 went. To regular viewers, it might come to no surprise that the remaining stragglers would work the Eindhoven-Venlo line, working alongside the NS 2600, what until that line was electrified in 1956. The final 3900 was 3922. Come October 1957, it had suffered the indignation of being demoted to a road shunter, puttering about with freight wagons out of Roosendaal. When she went, the 3900s were assigned to history. As I said in the opening of this video, 460s are curious and quintessentially European locomotives, as much as the Malays are North American, 282s are Asian, and Garretts are African and Oceanic. Although Black 5s and P8s are still big machines, as far as locomotives go on a global scale, they are only small. It is very tempting to compare a 460 with what usually came after, mostly Pacifics. But as I said in the first video of this trilogy, usually a system's demand for a Pacific hinges solely on the length of the main lines. That being said, it is not lost on me 460s really shone when they weren't expected to be the top dog on the timetable and, for lack of better terms, stayed in their lanes. What between 2-coach local trains in Dumfries and Galloway, or semi-fasts out of Stuttgart. Kings, Castles, Star and Saints are nice and all, but you could hardly task them with the more menial duties entrusted to the P8s and Black Staniers. Once I settled on doing 460s for one of these design trilogies, I immediately knew which locomotives I wanted to talk about, and they just so happened to neatly fit the theme of wedding gifts. But if there was an underlying tone with this series of videos, I think it would be knowing one's limits. Thank you for watching. If you have any ideas in regards to the next design trilogy, please put your thoughts in the comments below, and I really do appreciate all your feedback. And I will see you all in the next video. Cheerio!